Hello, 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 and welcome to Thursday. This is the fourth Thursday of the month, and on the fourth Thursday of the month, we do our resource share. So, what we do with resource share is we share all of the resources that we found helpful throughout the month. So, I am Sadal Jones, and this
I'm Claire
is
Horner.
Claire Horner, and we are the founders of Reset. The goal of this particular platform is to really reset our lives after sexual trauma. We provide resources, information, tips to help you on your trauma recovery journey. So we're excited to get started for this month's resource share for March. We have some exciting and maybe some new resources that we have not shared before. So let's jump into it.
Definitely. So for March, we've been talking about self sabotage. And even for this first quarter of the year, the whole quarter, we're talking about how to set yourself up well. Because when we're using resources in our healing, sometimes we've got to be able to check in and see what we really need. Because I am my own best resource. You are your own best resource. We got to figure out what we really need. And so setting ourselves up well is part of that plan. So we haven't even gotten to the start button yet. So we're setting things up and knowing how you're going to get in your own way, how you're going to self-sabotage, because you will, I do, we do, you do, Sadal does, everybody does.
Mm.
And so we have to own that first of all, and know what kind of brand of sabotage that we use. Do we avoid? Do we create chaos? Do we create, for instance, do we create some kind of financial chaos? Do we create relationship chaos so that, I can't possibly do my healing work because my life is so chaotic?
Mhm.
That's a in the mirror moment where we can get real with ourselves. We may need to even ask a friend, how do I get in my own way when there's something that I
Mhm.
really want to do but I sabotage it? How do I do that? What does that look like? So a friend may be able to point that out easier for you. But the main thing is, know this is part of the process. Sabotage is part of the journey. Plan
Mhm.
for it. So that's
Mhm.
that's where we're kind of circling this month. And I've got some resources that are a little bit off that topic, but I found in the process of this month. And then Sadal's got some that are specific to sabotage. So
Absolutely.
why don't you head us off?
Awesome sauce. So I think the first resource that I listed this week was an article. We haven't really done a whole lot of articles. It's an article in Psychology Today, and it is called "How to Stop Self Sabotage." I think that this article is really important because it speaks to exactly what Claire is talking about: the fact that self sabotage is going to happen, and then here are some tips to kind of help us when we know this is happening. If you've identified how you self sabotage, whether that's meaning relationships or whether that is financially, whatever the thing is, whatever your brand of self sabotage is, once you recognize that, then you'll be better able to know when it's happening, and then you can start to stop that, right? So this article actually goes the step further. So Claire talks about understanding your brand of self-sabotage, and the article from Psychology Today really goes through the steps. How do you stop it once you know that it's happening, so that you can get to the healing journey that you really want to get to? So it's a really good article, not very long. It's online, and we'll make sure to have the link for the article so that you all can access it. But it's a very short article, but I think it's really impactful when it comes to healing, because we do a lot of things we probably shouldn't do as it relates to our process and our progress. And I think that comes from a space of not really knowing how to stop the habit that we have. And self sabotage is something that usually we learn over time. We learn how to protect ourselves in this way, but really it hinders us from getting to the goal that we have for ourselves. And so if we're able to get the tools needed in order to stop that behavior, I think that is key. And so that's what this article does. It really does outline specific steps and strategies on how to stop that sabotaging behavior. So that is my first resource for this week. And again, we haven't really done articles as much, but this was a really good one.
Yeah, there's a lot of good articles out there. Psychology Today is a pretty good resource for that. Um, so the resource I want to share is actually something that we participated in this month. And I know you don't know us very well, but maybe this will give you a little bit of insight, and hopefully it sounds like a possibility or a good resource for some people. So I have a colleague, and actually we both have a colleague. I know her a little bit better than Sadal does, but she's a therapist in Atlanta, and she does a burlesque show each year, and it's called Sex and Sensuality, and it's to support women, not just women, but people coming out of kind of a into a sexual healing place and re re re-owning, that's not a word, taking back our power in our bodies. And burlesque to me is something that's more of an art form. It's not so much about objectification, and it really can be an embodiment, kind of like a lot of classes. We've seen pole dancing classes, and we've seen belly dancing, and we've seen a lot of things that are more are kind of getting back in your body and getting back into sensuality. Now that may not be something that is up your alley at all. That may sound like the worst possible thing. You might have judgments about me or us about even suggesting it. But Sadal had a conference, but I was able to go and be a vendor at the show, and I was able to meet some new people and share about Reset here, and connect with some people who are actually survivors. I met two people who actually, told me about that, and or mentioned friends who needed resources, and so just kind of wanted to mention that you are your own best resource for deciding what's best for you, and just that might be something that hasn't occurred to you, and so that's kind of our role in bringing it to you. But it was
I
a
love that.
very interesting time.
Yeah, I love that. And it's also something that's off the path, right? It's not just a book, it's not just an article, it's not, something that we typically do, but it is a way for people to understand, or people who to know that that's a part of the healing process. That's a part of the healing journey. So owning and regaining, feeling like you are regaining control of your body is so important, in that space of having been in a space where you don't feel like you have any control or you feel validated. So getting to that point, so at some point in your journey, getting to that is a part of it, and may not necessarily be something that you're, like you just said, Claire, that you're doing now, but it definitely is something that you may think about in the future, and you probably can't even think about it right now,
Hmm.
but it is an option for people who may be in different spots in their journey. Everyone isn't going to be in the same space, right? And so we will probably have some people watching and listening that are at that point where they're trying to figure that part out. So this is a great resource. I love it.
And I don't think it's not talked about very much. It's interesting, when I was talking to a couple of people about how we were going to be there. One person said, "Oh, I used to do that in college, and it was great," and
Hmm.
she's a survivor. And somebody
Hmm.
else said, "Oh, yeah, I really enjoy burlesque shows," and she's
Hmm.
a survivor. And so it's just, there's a
It's that
range of
ownership.
things. Hmm.
It's that ownership and control of what you do and how you move and all of those different things that, as it relates to your person. And there's something empowering about that control and
Hmm.
feeling that. Mhm.
Taking back the yes.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Love that. Good deal. I will go next. Mine is actually, we've done IG before, but we've not done a lot of IG specifically geared towards men. And so we found one of our colleagues from a distance has an IG that's specifically for men. And the IG handle is MEN2 health. So we'll make sure we list that also so that you guys can get it. But what I really like about this particular podcast, not podcast, this particular IG is that all of his posts really do gear towards men and their mental health, increasing the knowledge about and awareness of men and mental health, decreasing the stigma of men and mental health. It's kind of getting rid of the barrier that's attached to men and mental health. It's men have anxiety, men may be depressed, men may be dealing with some of the things that we don't always associate with men, or that idea of being a strong man, right? Like we can handle it. He really does demystify this idea of mental health for men. And I really appreciate that, because in the space of healing and sexual trauma healing, that is something Claire and I talk about often, about the lack of resources we have for individuals who identify as male, and what that feels like or looks like for them in the space. And so whenever we're able to find resources geared towards men and males, we kind of we grab onto those really quickly. So this particular IG is great. He is a therapist, and he does some coaching and different things like that. But he really does demystify men and mental health, and the idea that men need to be healthy, and one way that they are healthy is through their mental health. So really good resource.
The masculine experience is just it can be different in a lot of ways, similar in a lot of ways. The other aspect that isn't talked about enough is female perpetrators, and how often mothers can be perpetrators. And the psychological side can be a big one where, well, it's a little bit too big of a topic to go into. But the ways that adults, even females, can twist information and put boys and men into situations that are sexually harmful. You know, it happens a lot. And he doesn't he have a YouTube page as well?
I think he does. Yes, I think he does have a YouTube as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, So I'm going to share two at once. So poetry is an area that is really neat, I think. There's a lot of pages, a lot of websites where you can go and share, and even share anonymously. Reddit has, I haven't dug enough into Reddit I want to do that. That's one of the areas I want to explore some more for y'all. And y'all, yeah, we're in Atlanta, by the way.
Absolutely, y'all.
My accent isn't usually very thick, but I definitely got the y'alls in there. So two websites that I found that have particular sections for either sexual abuse or sexual recovery. One is allpoetry.com, and they have a sexual abuse category. And then the other one is familyfriendpoems.com, and there's a section for poems about rape by survivors. And so even just reading through that and hearing words that might describe your experience, describe your emotional experience, describe the power that was utilized, describe the after effects and how life is now, how difficult sleep might be, or taking care of your health. We talked last month about how difficult it might be to go to the doctor. And so, these are things that people are talking about, and you might even be talking about. A step for you in deciding what's best for you could be posting a poem anonymously, and seeing what responses you get. And certainly you'd want to check around the site and make sure that the admin is taking good care of everybody, and curbing out trolls and things like that. But I do think reading poetry, writing poetry, and connecting with other people's poetry is a really good resource.
I love that. I love that. It's a way for people who are artistic and have that creative side of them to use that in their healing process,
Mm-hmm.
or even enjoy that artistic expression. I love that. Awesome sauce. We have some good ones. These are very unique. We've not done poetry before. We've not done a lot of articles, and then also the burlesque. So this month we've had some very unique um, resources. So I love the expansion
It always gets
process.
me how much we find during the month.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not just saying that,
Yeah.
like, it's
Mhm.
neat to look back at the month and see how much we've done just in this category.
Yeah. I love that. And I think it's so helpful though too. It's like we're finding things that are helpful for our clients, and we're also finding things that we know will be helpful for other people, but also not just all in the same area, if that makes sense. You know, like the burlesque, that's something that I would imagine people don't necessarily think about as much, but it can be really helpful for different reasons. So it's not a one stop shop. Healing is not a one stop shop. It definitely is based on you and what you need. And so understanding that's why we've taken this time in this first quarter to really talk about the individual and what's needed for the individual and understanding and recognizing what you need um, for your journey. And so that brings me to my next resource is actually a blog post. We've not really done a lot of blog posts, but I found this blog post that speaks to triggers, not necessarily trauma triggers, but sabotage triggers, putting those two together, right? So this blog post really talks about not just why we sabotage or how we sabotage, but how does it start? What is the thing that prompts us to go to our trigger or prompts us to sabotage? What's the thing that kicks it off? And so this particular blog post is by Every Girl. We'll make sure we have that linked as well. But it's a really interesting blog because I don't think I've ever thought about sabotage in a way of being triggered. Usually I'm thinking of it as a way of protection, like a defense mechanism. Self sabotage being a defense mechanism that we use to protect ourselves when we feel things are either feeling uncomfortable or getting a little bit too far from what we're used to. But not, I've never thought about it in the way of, you've been triggered by something and that triggers you to then begin the self sabotage behavior. So this particular blog post, very detailed, it gives you step by step of what types of triggers happen, and they're not all focused on sexual trauma. So Claire and I talk a lot about symptoms and things happening that don't necessarily specifically speak to or name sexual trauma, but they definitely are symptoms of, right? Or antecedents, so to speak, of self sabotage. And that's kind of what this article does. So I liked it because it was, even if you don't recognize sexual trauma being an issue for you, but you recognize some of these symptoms in these areas of trigger, in these areas of sabotage, that can be still helpful for you if you're not in a space where you have verbalized that you have been traumatized sexually. And that's why it's important, in my opinion. I think having resources that help us, even if we don't know how to categorize the thing that's going on with us, is really important. We know we have a lot of folks that haven't gotten to that space where they can recognize the childhood trauma or they can recognize the sexual trauma that they've experienced or are able to verbalize it, but they know feelings, right? Anxiety, stress, isolation. They know what those things feel like. Perfectionism. They know what all of those things feel like. And so if you're able to understand how those things, how you're triggered in those ways and how you then begin to sabotage any progress that you may have had, I think that's important. And that's important and significant in the space of healing. So I like this blog post, and I like that it talks about trauma and it talks about sabotage in a way that was new to me. So that's it. It's by Every Girl, and the name of the article is, oh, not article. The name of the blog post is "Signs You're Self Sabotaging and How to Quit." Recognizing your triggers. So very, very, very excited about that particular blog.
I've got notes down here. That's why I'm looking down.
Oh,
Haven't gotten all
of course.
fancy and have things all situated. Uh,
We're
um,
getting there.
yeah, but I wanted to say, you may be here because a partner or a friend or a family member or your child may have gone through sexual trauma, and you're
Mhm.
trying to understand some of these things. And so, we're definitely here for that. We're here for that. And
Absolutely.
there's so much to understand. And like Sadal said, there's so much that happens before some people even recognize that this is what it is.
Mhm.
Sometimes there are things that happen Also put it this way: you may know what happened, you may have dealt
Mhm.
with what happened, you may
Mhm.
be some years beyond it, you may
Right.
feel healed in that area, but
Mhm.
there are ripple effects. There are some things that you don't even realize you believe
Absolutely.
about life, about people, about trust, that's kind of working in the background. And
Mhm.
what my word for that, I used this word this week, is residue. And
Oh, that's a good one.
like it's just like there's some residue
Mhm.
there that isn't quite washed
Mhm.
out yet. And I just got an image of, I have some hair here. I don't know if you can see it. It's quite long. And
Yeah.
just what happens when you get gunked up, and
Mhm.
and trauma gunks us up. I mean,
Mhm. Absolutely.
could be a visual you don't want. But I just wanted to kind of mention that this is a good place for putting getting some words to things and recognizing that this goes with this and trauma goes with
Mm.
this. And sometimes, you said perfectionism. That's one that you and I talk about a
We
good
talk
bit,
about
or experience quite a lot. And so
absolutely.
we catch each other on that. Do we really need to do that? Like, is that above and beyond? Do we
Yeah.
need to do that in 5 minutes rather than an hour?
Mhm.
Um, so I
And
just,
that's that self-sabotage. It's like it has to be a certain way. And so the progress doesn't happen, right? The journey doesn't continue if you're stuck, if you're gunked up, right? The progress doesn't happen.
and that's definitely a trigger for me, is,
Mhm.
thinking that something, getting in that black and white thinking,
Yeah.
and like it's either this way or it's this way. No, ma'am. Like, there
There's
are
so many other ways.
so
Mhm.
many other ways. And so that's one of the things I do, is I catch myself and say, wait a second, that feels black and white. What are the
Mhm.
other options? I might have to talk it out. I might
Right.
have, but to get it loosened up. But if my anxiety is up, then I'm much more likely to go to that black and white thinking. And
Right.
just as a moment of, connection, that's because when our anxiety goes up, our nervous system
Our
gets jacked
nervous
up.
system. Mhm.
And so we got to figure out how to get unlocked from that. And that's one of the ways I do it. How many other options are there? Let me
Mhm.
brainstorm how many options there are. And
Yeah.
then I tend to calm down.
Yeah. That was really good. I love that. No. So that's actually how to get unstuck. That's it right there. How to get unstuck.
Figure
That's
out
it.
what figure out what your journey
Mhm.
is. Own the
Yeah.
self-sabotage. Decide whether you want to even do this journey. You could be
Mhm.
here and you may be like, nope, not ready, not going to do it. Nope.
And that's
And
okay.
that's fine. You
That's
can just
perfectly fine.
imagine it. So the last
Mhm.
thing we want to talk about is, to give you another visual. I'm big on visual things. And something we were talking about is that, when you go in your house or somewhere to paint a space, what do you have to do first? You have to
Mm.
do
A lot of
what I
prep.
call a hell ton. You
Yeah,
need to
that's
do
good. Hell ton.
a hell ton of prep. You need to prep the walls. You got to clean them. I mean, if you want the paint to stay and look really good, you want to patch
Mhm.
those holes. You want to put that tape down. And I know there's lots of ways to do it, but the
Mhm.
better you prep it, sometimes it takes longer to do the prep than it does to paint the wall.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So that's knowing what your brand of sabotage is, planning for self sabotage, knowing what to do when it happens and how it
Because it
happens,
will.
because it will
Mhm.
repeatedly. That's going to help the paint to stick. It's going to help the
Mhm.
healing to stick. So that's what these things are about. Is, sometimes you don't even want you don't want to get to the to the real work part. You want to be just doing listening to us once a month, and that's all.
Yeah.
Maybe that's all you do. Maybe you follow
Mhm.
somebody on IG for a couple of weeks and just decide, okay, that's too much, and you unfollow them.
Mhm.
Well, you've already done some of your work. You've already started prepping the walls, so to
Prep.
speak.
Yeah, the prep is there.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Love that. Love that analogy. So we are done, I think, with our resources for this month. Again, very excited about the variety, not the number, but the variety of resources that we have for this month. And learning how to prepare yourself for what is inevitable. Sabotage is inevitable. It's going to happen. And sabotage doesn't mean failure, right? If you've prepared for it, doesn't mean that you fail. It doesn't mean your journey's over. It doesn't mean you can never heal from your sexual trauma. It does not mean that you can't be a warrior, right? Just because you're in that space or you've self-sabotaged in some way. I think that's important to know that that's still possible. You're still a survivor, you're still a warrior, you're still a thriver. All of those things still happen, because we all are in that space where sometimes we get in our own way, right? So we are our own best resource, but sometimes we get in our own way. So we have to learn how not to do that, um, while we're on this journey. So we thank you guys for joining us,
Thanks for joining
and
us. Yeah. And
we look
please let us
forward to next.
know. Sorry.
That's okay. Go ahead. You were about to say the same thing I was
I was
going to
just
say.
going to say, let us know what resources you're running into. What books are you reading? What podcasts are you listening to? Because we'll go research them and we'll bring them back here.
Absolutely.
And that's not just to get some traffic going in the comments. You know, this is
Mhm.
real. Like this
Mhm.
is what we want is for people to be hearing from other people and from us. You know what we find. We're just we're gathering and gathering and gathering and sharing, and that's why we're here. That's why we're here. So
Absolutely. That's the purpose of us being here. That's why we have Reset, to provide resources and information. Yeah,
exactly.
that's where we
So
are.
join
So
us over on Reset Trauma Unstuck on IG, and join us here in the comments, and we'll grow.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. Thanks, guys.